we're increasingly realizing that the 25 and 26-year-old in America has been screwed by the large banks and the car companies like never before, like no generation before. So if you're 25 or 26, you've been screwed by the big banks like you've never been screwed before.
From the loans that they're having
The
to
loans.
take.
They've, you cannot buy a house when you have a $1,200 car payment, when you have a student loan that's $85,000, and you got credit card debt coming out your ears. Record credit card debt, record car debt, record debt, debt. And then you sit there and whine you can't buy a house because you got victimized by these people. You set yourself up for it. You signed up for the trip, baby. But you've been screwed by the Citibanks. What's in your wallet? The money that's going to Citibank should have been going to buy you a house.
Now, I know what a lot of you guys are probably thinking. Josh, there's absolutely no way you agree with Dave Ramsey on absolutely anything, but you'd be surprised. Actually, going to say that, around the ages of 22 to 24, I actually spent the majority of my time after my work shift watching The Ramsey Show, and I more so like some of his Ramsey personalities, John Deloney, and even his daughter, Rachel, seems kind of sound in a lot of their advice. But overall, I kind of am more this idea and this mindset where you should never really agree fully with anybody. But you should definitely hear everybody out, being that you shouldn't just go based off of what the media says and what the propaganda says. You should actually dive deep into your own research. But it actually does seem that even Dave Ramsey is kind of starting to turn around, even though he's still putting the consumer at large, in the place of, that's still our faults, and more so it is. But a lot of these people, even the boomers, seem to actually realize that modern day generations, the modern day economy, is not as successful or as accountable as it was for past generations. Being that if you actually want to live in, any sort of simplicity of a life, having a car loan, car payment, having a car at all, which if you're going to have a car, even a reliable vehicle, you can buy used cars, but then the maintenance is going to be so much more that you might as well just buy a reliable vehicle, which the down payment on that's going to run you an average amount. It's actually insane. We'll actually throw up what the average car payment actually is for the average U.S. citizen in the year 2026, and it seems unreasonable to say the least. And if you have to add that into your budget, it kind of gets unreal. So in this video, we're going to discuss, home ownership, housing prices, the cost of living, cost of survival more so these days, and how despite which generation you're in or which tax bracket you feel like you fall into, feel free to leave your thoughts, opinions down below, discussing anything in this video or any other topics you'd like to hear me touch on the page in recent time. And I want to give a huge shout out to the of you guys checking out those links down below in the description and just showing up every day. Those are some of the best ways to support me and the content around here. Now, let's begin this shit show.
The interest rates are what's making housing unaffordable more than the price itself. Let me just show you an example. So if you look at someone like Bob, who bought in 2021, let's say he bought a $700,000 home at a 2.65% interest rate, his principal and interest payment would be $2,821. If Bob bought today a $400,000 home at an 8% interest rate, his payment would be $2,935. So even though it's $300K less, he's still paying more. But if you look at a 30-year period on interest, this is where it gets crazy. This 2.65% interest rate over 30 years would be $315,000 paid in interest, and this total home in 2021 would have cost $1,015,000. Where today, with this 8% interest rate on a $400K home, the interest over 30 years, if he never refinanced, is $656,000, and the total would be $1,056,000 after 30 years, which is $40K more. Even though this house was $300,000 less, it's still costing $40,000 more because of the interest rate. So what we have to hope for moving forward is that interest rates come down so more people can afford to buy, because Bob could have bought a $700,000 house 2 years ago and now can only afford a $400,000 home today. So let's hope the interest rates come down so more people can hop in the market.
When property taxes rise faster than income, two things happen. One, homeowners feel trapped, unable to sell, but struggling to keep up with escrow payments, especially when you include rising insurance costs. And two, renters are facing higher costs as landlords adjust for their own tax burdens. It's a squeeze from both ends, and it's starting to reshape where people choose to live.
Home ownership. Such a scary subject for modern individuals, such as the Gen Zers and the Millennials. Well, I feel like some Millennials actually were able to get into some of these places, but now they're starting to deal with the, interest tax, the property tax, and all these things going up so high, they're almost being priced out of house and home. And feel free to leave your thoughts, opinions down below. Just, feel free to share your, your age and how even at all you're able to buy your house. Being that a lot of people my age, I'm now currently 26, if you can even imagine having enough money for a down payment, and if you are able to save up enough money for a down payment, do you really want to just, gung-ho throw it all at a house that you want to be stuck in a certain place, being that I live in Minnesota, and man, the state sure is going to shit. So if you actually are kind of tied down to like a 30-year mortgage, even a 15-year mortgage, which most people these days can't really afford within their budgets, they're kind of forced to stick to that 30-year mortgage length, and that's kind of going to, almost hold you back if you want to have a future in certain aspects. Now, you can always sell it off, but good luck finding someone to sell it. Maybe you can sell it to one of these big organizations like BlackRock, which will just totally tear it down and build some sort of like apartment complex on top of it. That's probably what they'll do. I definitely saw that even in the rural communities I lived in for about 8 months last year, being that they were just, instead of actually, building houses and selling them to families, they're just building apartment complexes that it can actually fit more dense populations into certain communities. But again, we're totally getting rid of the idea of home ownership, and renting is only going to go up. And there's been too many videos where we discussed how the wage increases are not kind of going up in the same regard as the housing costs or any sort of, cost of living crisis right now, being that it feels like, hence, a crisis. So now, I actually did some studies to look at what the average home ownership or the average down payment that the average person would have to, actually apply for. And now, if you're even lucky enough to have good credit or have credit at all, most people in my peers don't even have credit at all. We just really opted out. We kind of don't believe in debt. But there really isn't many ways to get ahead without taking out some sort of debt or building up some sort of credit. At least it's kind of the American system, the American economy, what they kind of teach you. You have to have a credit score. You must, as soon as you turn 18, you should get a credit card, go buy a Snickers bar, pay it off, and then never use it again. That's kind of what they teach us. But again, is this actually a method that's going to actually result in any real benefits, or is this just kind of going to keep us kind of held back, which many people feels as if it is? Now, maybe you can say that modern generations don't really know how to use credit, but again, wasn't that kind of for the elders to teach us how to do? I know we're all adults, we all got to learn on our own, but school most definitely does not teach us finances. If anything, they teach us the opposite. They teach us how to be a worker and a slave rather than actually independent free thinker. But either way, feel free to leave your thoughts, opinions down below. If you were able to buy a house, what age you were when you were able to do so, and the down payment you had to put down, and if you feel like that was justified. And if you feel like that was a good decision. Because many people, especially people I know, many millennials, they kind of regret their decision. They feel kind of trapped down to their area, being, like I said before, priced out of house and home.
What do you see then as the biggest risk to the economy?
Well, when you look out ahead, it's the question, wars and other things that could really shake up the markets. But the real question is will the consumer keep spending? In the U.S., we have the U.S. economy growing about 2.4% next year. But that's dependent upon a consumer that stays engaged. If the consumer becomes less engaged as we move into from 25 into 26 and slows down their spending, that's going to slow down the economy. So that's a risk. You just don't see it anywhere now. The second risk is wars and other things that could go on that could create shocks to the market. And, then there's the usual things, cyber events and things like that. But the real risk is, will Americans, if the companies in America employ people and pay them a little bit more, they will spend, and the economy in the U.S. will be fine. And then you have these investments in the stimulus from the Tax Act. You have the stimulus from some of the investments coming in that ought to keep kicking in. And that's why our team went from 1.5% probably 4 months ago to 2.5%, 2.4% for 26.
The United States is about to break, and nobody is willing to talk about it. If we as a country don't make a change here, we are cooked. The media doesn't give it the attention it deserves. Politicians won't say it out loud. But our country, it's drowning in over $36 trillion in debt. And here's the terrifying part. We're now spending more than $1 trillion a year just to pay the interest. Not the debt itself, just the interest. It takes my breath away whenever I talk about it. Imagine you maxed out your credit card that you have, then took out more just to cover your monthly payments. That's what we're doing as a government and as a country. And when the bill comes due, it's you who's going to pay the price. Higher taxes, slash services, or worse, God forbid, a financial collapse that would make 2008 look like a hiccup. If we don't change course here, folks, if we don't stop printing money, overspending, and kicking this can down the road, your future, our future, won't be stable jobs and affordable homes. It'll be layoffs, rent that you can't afford, and retirement accounts that don't mean anything. Heck, some of you are saying right now, I'm already feeling the effects. They'll try to distract you with these headlines and drama, But this is the real threat we are facing, and nobody's coming to save us.
Now, I think a lot of the people who are, especially some of the people in the comments, I understand there will always be haters, there will always be people that will not agree with everything you say, and being that I'm an American, I fully understand that, and I still feel like it's still worthy to actually share your opinions, despite the backlash that you're most certainly going to get. But I see so many commenters that just say, usually the boomers or the Gen Xers that say this, they say, Josh, you're just complaining online. You think you're doing something, you're really never solving a problem. Now, I never really thought that creating a YouTube channel was going to change the entire economy. I never once actually considered, applying for any sort of political service. I'm just like everybody else. I'm a peasant in terms of the common day reality. But I do feel like stirring up conversations and actually, people not feeling as alone in their thoughts and feelings does genuinely provide some sort of relief, or kind of builds this discussion more so that eventually, as a collective groupthink, I'm against groupthink, but as a collective group, as a community, we can actually somehow stir the direction into the future, being that we can always point fingers at the older people that ruined it for us, but one day it's going to be us that's going to have to change the economy to make it more livable. Now, how much actual, how much really weight do we hold in terms of changing that? I don't really know. But the older people are going to die off eventually, and we're going to be in charge. Now, we're going to be the older people that they hate anyway, and some people will inherit some sort of, benefits or wealth or finances, but for the majority of us, you have to work and work and work, and the work never feels like it's enough. And for the working man, for the working individual, for the working house, for the working family, for the working class, it feels as if it's never really enough. And is that actually going to be just a, kind of a cannonball, a snowball effect? And is this going to continue getting worse and growing and growing and growing until inflation will price you out of everything? I mean, how much can you cut off your budget to actually survive? And I've done the whole Dave Ramsey beans and rice thing. After about 3 months, I actually passed out in my bathroom in my one-bedroom apartment I had when I was 23, which, again, inflation bankrupted me out of that place. Now I moved back in with family, which, again, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think living with family to save up for money to actually be able to have some sort of ownership in the future is definitely a great decision. I definitely do appreciate other cultures having that, because in the American mindset, in the Western world, if you're not just kicking the bird out of the nest, if you're not kicking your son or daughter out of the house at 18, maybe daughters not so much, but sons out of the house at 18, what are you doing? You're just kind of building a loser. Now, there are definitely some aspects of that. If your 26-year-old son is just playing Call of Duty video games in the basement and smoking weed all day, that's not very good. But if he's working 2, even 3 jobs, trying to build a side income, a side hustle, actually maybe trying to work for himself one day, that's most definitely respectable. But again, even if you live in your mom's basement, no matter how you're doing it, it's still kind of looked at as a negative reality for the Western world. And I think that's slowly starting to change, with many people starting to realize that being independent, living on your own, is not really the best measures. But again, that's where a lot of us sit in. And many people like myself don't really have parents around. They don't really have boomer parents that can actually provide for you or actually help you out in any sense, kind of leading us to this reality of we're fucked. Well, that's going to wrap up this video discussing home ownership, down payments, Dave Ramsey, and all this stuff that it kind of gets looked on in more of a negative sense, but is kind of a creeping reality that we can't ignore forever. So feel free to leave your thoughts, opinions down below. If you personally are a homeowner, if you are a realtor, if you are a landlord, any of that stuff, feel free to leave your thoughts, opinions down below. I know the majority of the people who watch my videos are in the same position as me, or very similar at least. We're kind of struggling to get by. It doesn't really matter how hard you work, it never really seems to be like enough, and the whole hope on the horizon has been lost long ago. But despite all that, feel free to leave your thoughts, opinions down below. I always love to read those, respond to the ones I see fit, as well as I want to give a huge shout out and a lot of acknowledgement to the handful of you guys who check out these videos every day, and the handful of you guys who check out those links down below in the description. Those are always some of the best ways to support me, the discussion-based content around here, and keep me doing what I'm doing each and every day. More than appreciate you guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I hope to see you in the next one. God bless.